The following interview is being conducted as part of the Price of Freedom project by the Madison County Military Heritage Commission to inform our community of the sacrifices made by those in the military on battlefields around the world. We wish to thank the Huntsville School System and the ETV Broadcast Center for their help in presenting this Military Heritage program. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Kennemer. Welcome to our program. Today we'll be talking with U.S. Army veteran Johnny Davis. Johnny is the recipient of the Bronze Star Medal with Valor for his heroism while serving with the U.S. Army's 17th Air Cavalry in South Vietnam in 1972. He was inducted into the Madison County Military Heritage Hall of Heroes in 2016. Johnny, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for your time.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, good to see you again. First of all, tell us a little about yourself. Now, you're a North Carolina native, right?
Yes, sir. Grew up in North Carolina.
Yeah. Now, tell us about your family growing up. Did you have brothers and sisters, or anybody in that was in the military from your family?
I've had two uncles in the military. Okay. I have four sisters and one brother. And like I say, I grew up out in the country in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Little Avery County.
Yeah.
Grew up there. Went to the school there. High school, graduated in 1970.
Your family was into farming or tobacco? You raised tobacco?
Yeah, we had a small farm. We grew tobacco. We grew corn. Of course, we always had a big garden to feed a big family, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Because you had uncles in the military, were they in World War II, Korea? Or?
My oldest uncle was in Korea.
And
I had another uncle was in Korea, which was wounded. And then my youngest uncle, he went in on the backside of the Korean War.
I see. Now you were drafted, right? Tell us about that. You got the letter in the mail, right?
Got the letter in the mail. Well, first off, you got we call it a lottery number.
Yeah, yeah.
And mine was 60. And then I got the letter to go be examined, and at the time I had a motorcycle accident. I broke my right thumb. So when I went to be examined, they just looked at it and went on, you know. And of course I passed my physical and everything, and that was in January of 71.
71, yeah.
And then April, I got my calling to come on. Greetings from your president, which was Richard Nixon.
Yes, sir.
And he sent us those nice letters, and I left in May 17th, going to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Right.
Took my basic training there on Tank Hill, and then I went to Fort Rucker to the aviation school.
Now, before we talk about the aviation, what did you take, like aptitude test? And they said, well, you'd be suitable for aviation. How did it work out for you?
Of course, when you first get to Fort Jackson, of course, they do all kinds of tests and stuff, but they test you, and it's your skills that you have. And I was high in mechanical skills. So that's, of course, they wanted you to re-enlist, you know, so that you could get in the MSO that you wanted, but I elected not to.
I see.
So when I got my orders to go to Fort Rucker, it was in the aviation school as a mechanic, basically what we took.
Mechanical, you worked on helicopters or fixed wings?
Fixed wings and helicopters. They trained us. We was there for 10 weeks, and of course, you know, the basics training is what there was, you know. And then the last week we actually we went on flying, you know, riding and checking helicopters and doing maintenance on those. And
was that only Huey mostly, Johnny, or what?
Yes, HoH Huey.
Yeah. Now maintenance, basically would you like have overhaul engines, or basically do the maintenance, you know, check the oil, that sort of thing? And
well, you done always a pre-trip. You know, you went from front to back and you look and see if there's leaks and if there was something loose or, you know, this type thing. And then you had to sign off for it you know, when you become a
Right.
you know, like a crew chief, you had to sign off on everything. But it was the basic skills of checking and making sure that it was safe to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, your pilot and co-pilot came behind you and checked everything also. So,
Well, as a crew chief, did you go out on every flight, mission, or?
we did.
I see. Yeah. Talk about being away from home while you were in the military. Was that like the first time you ever been away from home?
I had
you know, that area.
I had an uncle that lived in New Jersey, and I'd go up and spend a couple months in the summer for a couple years, you know, with him. But other than that, I never been away from home. You know,
Yeah.
always home.
Yeah, like me, a homebody. Well, now, what were you married at that time?
No.
I see. Yeah. Now, what was it like when you did you go after Fort Rucker? Did you go to another base before you went to Vietnam?
No, when I left Fort Rucker, I got my orders to go to Vietnam. And come home for a couple weeks and went to Washington State, and they processed us in about 9 o'clock one night. They called us all and loaded us up on a plane, and we left there and we flew into Anchorage, Alaska. And we was there probably an hour or so, and then we flew into Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam.
Tell us about when you first arrived in Vietnam, you know, in a war zone area. Talk about that experience.
We got in, we flew in there probably somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the airport was taking mortar rounds when we got there.
Okay.
So they got us on the ground and they got us in a bunker, and we stayed there in that bunker for probably, I don't know, an hour and a half. Then they got us out and got us into the processing, started processing us through.
Quite an indoctrination.
It sure was.
Yeah. How long did you say you had to stay in the bunker?
Probably an hour and a half
in
that bunker.
Yeah. All right, so tell us about what happened then. You
got processed through, and they carried us up to another holding station. We stayed there probably about a week, and then they was 9 of us that graduated Fort Rucker, and we all went over together except one, and one of them he wasn't 19 years old yet.
I see.
So at the time he had to be 19 before they sent you over there.
I see.
All 8 of us, we all flew over, and then when we got up to the second holding place, they separated all of us. We all went our separate ways, and then I went to play coup, and I was stationed there the whole time I was there.
You knew that when you left the station that you were going to be with the 17th Air Cav?
Yes.
Yeah,
they cut orders and sent us up there.
I see.
And they picked us up, and that was the Chinook was the first helicopter I was on in Vietnam. And if you've ever been on a Chinook, you're sitting in the back. It's the noisiest thing you can ever be in. You don't know where you're going. Yeah. So all those hydraulic lines running up and down inside those things. It's so noisy. You don't know where you're going to make it or not. You know.
Tell us about your first experience going out on a mission after you were in play coup and you're going out for the first time on a mission. Talk about that.
So the first 5 or 6 weeks, I worked in the hangar.
Okay.
And they pull engines and they do rotor blades and this type of thing, and we pull maintenance. We pull maintenance on helicopters, and then I was transferred from that to B Company, which is a lift platoon, and then I was signed as a gunner to a H model, which I got a crew chief, and of course he's a gunner also, but then just a gunner, and then a pilot and a co-pilot. So I was signed for that for about probably about a month, and then the crew chief on my bird came back to the States. His term was up.
His tour was over.
And his tour was over, and then they moved me into the crew chief. But we'd get up early in the morning, probably about 4 o'clock in the morning. We'd hit the mess hall, and we'd grab. One of the jobs of the gunner was to make sure all the weapons, all ammo was on that bird, and that was his basic duties, you know. So he had to go get them on the truck, and the flight line was probably about 1.5 miles from our barracks. So got that on there and make sure that was all right. And then when you move up to a crew chief gunner, you got to go down. You got to get all the cowling and everything open, because when the pilot and the co-pilot comes down and start checking everything, and then you got to go back and close everything up. And if there's anything on most of your aircrafts, everything's safety wired. And if there's any, they check safety wires, and just make sure it's safe, because their life is just as much dangerous as anybody else.
Sure, yeah.
And I was in a CAV unit. The first 6 months I was over there, we actually inserted Americans on the ground. We go out and look for the enemy, and then if some of our we'd have to put Americans on the ground, and then we'd have to go back and and get them. We'd insert them and extract them both. So it was a lot different than something you wasn't really expecting. Being 19 years old, you never growing up in a community like I grew up, you never
thought about something like that.
And there wasn't. The war was covered, but it wasn't covered, like it is today.
That's right.
So you just didn't have.
Things were different then.
It sure was.
Now talk about Johnny, your first experience when you did go out, when you first took fire, on a mission. What was that like? I mean, these people are shooting at me. I mean, there got to be some kind of.
Well, at first, the first time we was going into hot LZ. Of course, the pilot knew that, and he told us, y'all be ready. We're going into hot LZ, and we was putting Americans on the ground. And as we went in, we didn't take any fire, and we'd let them off and started to pull up. Then we started taking fire. I guess natural instinct. Hey, you got to shoot back. They're shooting at you. They're going to get you if they can. So, and you don't really. Well, let's say I didn't really think, a whole lot about it, because it's just like I say, it's natural instinct.
Training kicks in and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And you just hammer down, man.
Try to hold on.
Hold on and hope and pray. But you don't think anything about it. Even after that, after you get back, you might think a little bit about it. But after that first experience, it's just a routine thing. You just get used to it.
You have a job to do.
You got a job to do it. That's correct.
Johnny, when you got free time, however little that was over there, what did you do? What kind of relaxation? Did you get to see movies? I know we didn't have cell phones back then. They talk about what kind of relaxation.
Well, they would have up at the club and stuff. They'd have movies along you could go see, and then during the day, we get us a softball game, play a little football.
Take your mind off of the
just sort of. And if you wasn't on a red alert or something, you could go to town, so just to see how those people lived. It was amazing, they didn't have anything.
Right. You talk about red alert now. Is that like you have to be on a half-hour notice, 15 minutes notice?
Well, you have to be ready to go whenever they call.
When they call, you've got to go straight to your ship and.
Right.
I see. Yeah.
Every month, our platoon one full week was on red alert. If something come up at night, we had to go, or we had to medevac. Sometimes we'd have to do. We'd have different missions we'd have to get done. So. It wasn't a 8-hour job over there. You use it from there, like I say, from 4 o'clock in the morning, and time you got in, you got your, all the brass and stuff picked out of your ship, and your ship ready to go the next day. You get to the mess hall, because they always kept food for us, and you eat. It was 8 or 9 o'clock.
Yeah, long day.
A long day, and there was no Saturdays and Sundays off, every 2 weeks you was, unless it was the weather, the monsoon season over, sometimes it's bad. There's no fly,
Right.
But when it was pretty, you you can get one down day old about every 2 weeks.
You flew over much of the country. Describe to, especially our young people that may be studying about Vietnam, describe the countryside. And it's a beautiful country. I mean,
it is. Of course, you know, being up in the air, up above everything, you've seen, you know, there's a lot of bomb craters and a lot of stuff blowed up and burnt up and stuff. And of course, you know, they use a lot of Agent Orange to kill all the foliage. But, you know, I was in the Central Highlands, which is a mountainous, you know, a lot of mountains around there. But you would go into, you know, to a LZ, and there would be grass as high as a helicopter, you know. And of course, you know, it was pretty, you know, pretty color, foliation was beautiful, and it is, you know, it was pretty country.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of places that you'd fly over, you know, didn't have any signs of any war, and so it is a beautiful country. Yeah. And me growing up in the mountains of North Carolina, you know, I
relate to it.
You know, could relate to how the mountains were.
Sure.
You know, so it was,
I'm sure you formed lasting friendships in the service. Do you still stay in contact with any of your friends that you knew and worked with over there?
I've got a couple in North Carolina that I do. Some of them's already, you know, deceased. I'm trying to get a hold of a sergeant that I had. I did get a hold of his sister, so hopefully I'm gonna in the last couple of weeks. So I'm hoping.
I'm sure some of the air cav units get together, have reunions on occasion, I guess, around the country, don't they?
They do. I hadn't been fortunate enough to go to any of them, but I'm getting more active in you know, the VVA and try to get back to seeing some of the old buddies, you know. But you know, you meet friends, and when you're in situations like we were, your buddy, you know, he's family, you know.
You depend on him.
You depend on him, he depends on you. Exactly. So it's an everlasting friendship and relationship you got with them.
Yeah, you never forget them, really.
Never forget them, that's correct.
Now, no email back then. We didn't have computers, you know, like we do today. But it was great to receive a letter back home. How long did it take? A week and a half? How long did it take to get a letter from back home?
I'm sure at least a week, because you know, everything that come in country and went out of country, most of the time they opened it up and looked at it, you know. But in fact, I can remember, you know, you didn't put a stamp on it, you just wrote free on it.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And Christmas, the hardest time over there was Christmas. You know? And I got a lot of Christmas cards from families and friends and people that you know, that I knew.
Wishing you well and pulling for you.
Just drop you a Christmas card or a little note, you know, it meant a lot.
Did you get some like fruit cake or anything that was mashed and cookies? I think we all received some of that, but it was good. It still tasted good, right?
You still ate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we did. My sister, she actually sent me a couple of T-shirts, you know, and so and cookies, but it was a few weeks old, but like you say, it was still good.
Yeah. Johnny, I'm sure you have mixed feelings about serving in a war, but what is your favorite memory from serving in Vietnam or in the Army as a whole?
Well, it's just an honor to serve your country.
Yeah.
And that's the way I always looked at it. You know, I was drafted. I didn't do like this particular time, there was so many draft dodgers. They was going to Canada and they was protesting, and, you know, it was always an honor for me to go and serve my country and do what little I could. You know, felt like I was doing it for my country and the future generation of this country.
Yeah. Now, you received the Bronze Star with Valor for going into the burning wreckage of a downed aircraft and saving the lives of 2 fellow servicemen. Tell us more about that day and the circumstances that led you to doing what you did. Talk about it. Describe what happened.
We had been up at Tuiwa, which is just north of Pleiku, and we was on a mission, and on our missions we'd have 2 loaches out flying on top of treetops. We'd have Chuck, which is command ship, way up. We'd have 2 Cobras flying, and we always had 2 H models flying. And of course, you know, we burn off the fuel, we'd have to come back in and refuel. So we had the other ships that came out and relieved us, and we came back and refueled, and we picked up and was a staging area where we was at, you know. So it was in the Air Force base right there where it's at. So these C-130s had been coming in all day, landing and turning and dropping their doors and rolling out, you know, the supplies that they was leaving there.
Yep.
And they had been taking mortar rounds all day. And of course there was more and more mortar rounds beginning to come. And this was probably in the, best I remember, is probably around 2 or 3 o'clock our time there. And we had just sat down and got out, and C-130 come in and landed, and they was putting mortars in front of him too. So when he went down and made his turn and started back, he just dropped his door and started it down the runway for it to roll off, bring up the nose of the plane for it to run out. They hit the back of the door, which that didn't really affect it, but he went down the runway just a little bit more, and the mortar round hit it, and it went off. It went off the end of the runway, and of course it just crashed and started burning. Our pilot, we got on the helicopter, jumped on the helicopter, and we picked up and went down there. And
how far were you away from this?
We was probably about 3/4 way down the end of the runway.
I see.
So, but it was after it went off the end of the runway, it was probably, you know, probably a couple hundred yards off the end of the runway where it went down. And the 2 pilots actually was walking away, but the other crew members weren't, and we could see them, my door gunner and myself. And of course there was a couple other helicopters coming in too, so we got them out. And of course it just, you know, it was just almost disintegrated. But after it was, you know, after it was over with, we found out later one of the pilots actually died on the way to the hospital. But as far as I know, the 2 guys, and we didn't get any information, names or anything, you know.
So the plane was still burning when you guys went in to try to rescue them?
It was.
Were they laying on the ground and you had to
untangle
them?
They was trying to get out.
I see.
And one of them pretty much got free, and the other one, he was the gunner and myself and a couple of others. We got a hold of him, got him out.
I see. Yeah. How long this was just a matter of what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? I mean, probably less than that.
Yeah, of course, you know, again, natural instinct kicks in, and you do it and don't think anything about time or what you're doing, you know.
Exactly.
And I'm probably within, you know, time we picked up, we got there, and we got them on the helicopter to get them out of there. It was probably 10 minutes at the most.
Yeah. Just instinct, wasn't it? I mean, you had to do what you had to do, and just you jump off your plane and you go and you try to help these people. Yeah. Could you see them once you landed, or once you got there? You could see where they're at. Were they, you know, waving their arms or something? Or
yeah, they was in the back of the plane, because what they was doing, they was unstrapping that cargo and letting it roll out. You see, so they was in the back of the plane, and the back door was still down. So. They was right at the rear of the plane. Now, if they'd been on up in that plane, we may not ever got them, you know.
Did you ever stay in contact with them, or did they make it? Did you ever hear?
Well, we heard from our commanding officer, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later that they was fine, that they brought them back, but I never did get any names. I see who they were or anything, but they was, you know, Air Force.
I see, right. Now, did you suffer any burns? Were you hurt during the rescue?
I mean, you had a scratch or 2, but I didn't receive any burns or anything.
You had a flight suit on, I guess.
Yes.
You know, that helped some.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you keep your helmet on while you were going?
Yeah.
Johnny, what do you attribute, or who do you think helped prepare you the most to take this kind of action you did during that rescue? I mean, a lot of guys, you know, veterans will say, well, it's a tough sergeant, or my upbringing, you know. What do you think?
Well, it's probably more upbringing, you know. I grew up with only one grandfather. My other grandfather passed away when my mother was real young. My grandparents and my daddy, you know, always taught me it's better to help others, you know, when they're in need. And I think that's probably more than anything. And then the training you get, you know, at the time when you're going through basic training or you're going through AIT, you're getting training that you don't think in the back of your mind, well, I'm not ever going to need this, you know. But that sort of programming you what you might need.
Right, yeah. How would you describe to young people what it's like to serve in a war zone? The thoughts you have of possibly being killed or wounded during a battle. I mean, you don't stop and think, well, I could die right here trying to save these people. I mean, what goes through your mind? I mean,
you know, I think you never think about it. You know, after it's over with, you might think, you know, well, I could have been killed, you know, with it. But during the time, you don't, there's just no thoughts in your mind about it. You just do it, you know.
Right. And that's what we were talking about before, is where the training kicks in, instinct, you know, upbringing, all these things combined, I guess.
It does.
Yeah. I know people often wonder, is it okay to be afraid or scared while serving in a war zone or during combat? I mean, being scared or afraid, I think, is just natural for most people, but you overcome that, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong being scared.
Right.
You know, being scared or being careful, you know. But like you say, natural instinct will kick in. You know, when you know it got to get done and you're the only one around or someone around, that's gonna, you're gonna get it done.
Kind of leads the way for you.
That's correct.
How do you feel when people call you a hero, when they read or hear about what you did during your time in Vietnam?
I never consider myself a hero. Yeah. You know, I just felt like I was doing a job, I was serving my country, and I was proud of it.
Yeah. Do you often wonder, would you do it all over again?
If I was about 50 years younger,
that would help.
It would help, yes, sir. But I would, yeah, and I would encourage young men and women today to look at that option. You know, it's just an honor that you know that you served your country, and that you've had a little bit. That's correct. That you've had a little bit to do with the safety of this country.
Right. You've served during a war, and through the years, I'm sure you've seen a few at least, war movies. Do you think war is depicted accurately in most of the movies or TV shows you've seen?
Like some of the later ones that come out now, they've done a lot of documentation on Vietnam War, and I think they're actually talking to a lot of the guys that served over there, and they're fairly active now. Some of the Hollywood movies is, you know, it's sort of played up, real big, but some of the documentation,
over glamorous, I guess, or whatever.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah. Johnny, how long did you stay in Vietnam, and when did you come back to the States?
1 year and 1 day.
Yeah.
I came back in May, or excuse me, I went over on October 15th, and I came back October 14th, 1972.
Yeah, that's near the end of the war. Yeah,
yes, we was winding down.
Yeah, winding down. What kind of feelings did you have when you got on that plane to come back home? I mean, I know you're excited about getting to come back to the States, but somebody else has got to replace you, so I guess you had some feelings for them as well.
Well, you do, and you know, and a lot of the guys that are coming over there, they didn't, you know, just like when I went over there, we was all newbies, you know.
Yeah. And
you have to learn, and you know, and I was with a group of guys that, you know, they treated you, and they helped you, and they tell you what what you can experience or what you need to look out for when you go out on a mission.
Yep.
And which, you know, that saved you. Experience is hard to beat in a situation like that if you listen to them, you know.
Right. Take heed to what their advice, because they do have the experience.
That's correct.
Many of our young people who may be watching this interview have heard about or read about the protests during the Vietnam War. Did you encounter any protests when you came back home, and if so, what was that experience like?
Well, when I was over there, Jane Fonda was in North Vietnam protesting against us. And then when I came back, we flew into Oakland, and I flew from there to Atlanta Airport. As we coming through Atlanta Airport, you know, they was calling us baby killers, and they was cussing at us, and they even actually spit at us, you know, protesting us, protesting the war. And, you know, it was, you know, you really have a bad thought about that, you know. That's the worst part of coming back home, you know. We was not welcome, you know. We was not greeted with open arms, you know. And what you wanted to do is just sort of slip through, get on the home, and forget about it. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. Some of our veterans talk about the adjustment they have to make once they come home from a war zone. What was it like for you?
Well, of course, the time difference was, you know, sleeping and stuff was big. The food, you know, you got used to eating what you had over there, and you come back to a good home cooking, it's rough. Yeah. But the biggest thing that I had encountered was, you know, at night over there we'd take incoming, and you'd get shook out of your bunk and stuff, you know. Any loud noise, man, it was just sort of devastating to me. I mean, I've caught myself, I remember one time right after I got home, me and a friend of mine was standing and talking, a car came by and backfired, and I was on the ground. You know, so it took several years to get over that. And now if something happens real quick, I'm still
on alert.
Yeah, still on alert. That's correct.
Yeah. Tell us about your family. You and your wife Brenda, I think. How long have you been married?
46 years.
46. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And you got 12 grandchildren. Tell us about your family.
Well, I got my oldest is a son, and I got 2 daughters. And like I say, we've got 12 grandchildren. They're all into sports, every kind of sports, from volleyball to softball, baseball. My son, he plays golf, and of course, I got a daughter that's been teaching. She's on her 15th year teaching now. But basically, I enjoy watching those grandkids play ball. Of course, our kids always real active in sports, you know, and we'd travel all over the country playing basketball or softball, football. Yeah. And so it just sort of graduates into your grandkids now, you know. And
it could be a 7-day-a-week
it could be
endeavor, you know, but it's something you enjoy. I know.
I really enjoy it, and it's you know, it's an honor to be able to do it.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little about what you did when you got back, got out of service. What line of work, and you're still working, I understand. Tell us what you did.
When I got back from Vietnam, I was stationed at Redstone. And they put me in a motor pool for about 2 months. Then they had this program that you could get what they call early out to work, you know, to sort of get you back into the reality of life, I guess you'd say. And I went to work at a dealership as a mechanics helper here in town. And so I already had the mechanical skills and the background, so you know, I did real well in mechanic, and then I moved up into management, and I was in management for 35 years, and so I moved to another job as a manager, and that dealership closed. So the last 6 years, I've been in outside sales, heavy truck parts, and trailer parts, and I've got I work Tennessee and North Alabama.
Do a little traveling.
Yeah, every day I got 106 customers that I call on, and I really enjoy it. You know, I really enjoy meeting people and trying to help people, and it's just a pleasure to do that.
You met your wife, Brenda, here in Huntsville, right?
I did.
Yeah.
And we got married and settled down, and
46 years ago?
46 years ago, sure have.
Johnny, you've mentioned that your family really didn't know much about what you did and the heroism you displayed while in Vietnam. Was there a reason for that?
Well, you just, you know, it's just, you wanted to forget it, basically. You know,
They never knew anything about this. I mean, what you did.
I mean, they knew I served in Vietnam, but they didn't know anything else. And I went down to, my doctor wanted me to get in the VA system because I was diagnosed as a diabetic.
I see.
And he wanted me to get in the VA system, which he's a veteran also. So I went down and got signed up. And of course, you take your DD 214 form and all that stuff's
all
on
the information
there.
you have,
Right there. And Mr. Harvey down there wanted me to ask me if he could put me up for the Madison County Hall of Heroes.
Right.
And I said, well, let me think about it. So I had to take some more information back down to him in a week or so, and I did, and I'd thought about it, and he sort of talked me into it because I hadn't made my mind I was going to do that, you know. So he said, well, if you don't let people know, you know, these young people and the people out here, that they need to know what y'all went through over there. So I agreed to it, and then I got to thinking on the way home, well, I'm going to have to tell my family. I had never told them. So when I got home, I had a lot of my stuff all boxed up, you know, and I pulled out some of my stuff and I let my wife read it. She said, "Well, hadn't you told me this?" I said, "Well, I just didn't think it was important, you know." And then I told my kids. So, and they, you know, they're all proud and glad that I shared that with them. You know?
Right. Yeah. Long last.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned being inducted into the Hall of Heroes. What was that experience like for you?
It's one of the greatest honor I think I've had, being inducted with a group of men that's already in there, you know, and a lot of them's already deceased now, you know, and but it's a great organization, and they treated us unbelievably. You know, you have dinner and you're honored, and everybody's so thankful. You know, the news media came out, done several interviews. You know, was in the Veterans Parade. It's just honor that you know that people still respect and thank the veterans for their service.
You've received that honor that you didn't receive earlier, you know, when you came back home.
That's correct.
Yeah, or at least part of it, yeah. As we close out the interview, Johnny, what advice would you give to young people who may be considering, I know you didn't say 20 years, nor did I, in the service, but what advice would you give who may be considering, you know, going into the military?
Well, I think if a person decides to go in, it'll be one of the greatest things that they can live with the rest of their life, to serve their country. And the training that they're going to get, you never know out in the real life what some of that training will help you do.
Yeah, be helpful in life.
That's
throughout
correct.
life, gain maturity and so forth. Johnny, thank you so much for participating in our oral history interview series and allowing us to preserve your military experience for the people of this community. And thank you, sir, for your service to our country.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, if you would like more information regarding this interview or any interview in our Military Heritage series, please contact the Madison County Military Heritage Commission website at mcmhc.org. I'm Tom McKennamer. Thank you for being with us.